Welcome to our second lesson on square roots. In this lesson, we're going to talk about estimating square roots, and we're also going to talk about approximating square roots. So these first two questions are pretty simple. They're asking between which two consecutive integers is each square root. So when I think about the square root of 25, I know that the answer would be 5. And when I think about the square root of 36, I know the answer would be 6. And this question is kind of saying like, well, where does this fall? And this falls somewhere between the square root of 25 and the square root of 36. Obviously closer to the square root of 25, but if the question is between what two consecutive integers, remember consecutive means in a row, integers means whole numbers and their opposites, the answer would be between 5 and 6. So this answer, the square root of 27, it's an irrational number. There's nothing that's easily something times itself that will be 27. But I know it's going to be 5 point something because it's going to be between 5 and 6. Now my next question is asking about the negative square root of 60. Now, sometimes people look at 60 and they say, oh, it's an even number. It's something times itself. Just because it's an even number does not make it rational. Remember, you need something times itself to equal 60. And there is no number that's precise that is times itself that could be 60. And so we need to think of kind of the two things that the square root of 60 would lie between. And I'm just going to think about it as positive 60 for now, and we'll talk about the negative sign in a little bit. But I know that 7 squared is 49, so the square root of 49 is 7. And then I know that 8 squared is 64, so the square root of 64 is 8. So I see that 60 lies between the square root of 49, the square root of 60 lies between the square root of 49 and the square root of 64, obviously closer to the square root of 64. Now, when we talk about the negative square root, we're going to say it's between the consecutive integers negative 8 and negative 7. Okay, it's somewhere between that negative 8 and negative 7, so it's going to be negative 7 point something. Okay, so on to the next part, estimating square roots. Between what two consecutive integers is the number 14 and 52 hundredths? Now, again, this is not going to be a rational answer, but we can get kind of close in estimating what the answer would be around. So I know that 3 squared is 9, and I know that 4 squared is 16. So between what two consecutive integers? It's between the numbers 3 and 4. Now, one thing I want to point out is sometimes people get confused and they start saying it's between 9 and 6. That's not what we're asking about. We're asking to figure out where this answer lies. So 3 point something times 3 point something would get me close to the 14 and 52 hundredths number. So the answer to the square root of 14 and 52 hundredths is irrational, but it's somewhere between 3 and 4. Now, if we're going to estimate the answer to the nearest tenth, it's going to be a little bit of guess and check work, but we also want to make educated guesses so that we're not wasting our time, so that we're efficient mathematicians. So when I think of the square root of, when I think of 3 squared being 9 and 4 squared being 16, this number is obviously closer to 16 than it is to 9. So that means that my answer is going to be closer to 4 than 3. So I'm kind of going to say, well, I know it's going to be bigger than 3.5. It's going to be closer to 4 than it is 3. And in fact, 14 and 52 hundredths is really quite close to 16. So I'm going to guess it's not, 3 and 5 tenths. It's not 3 and 6 tenths. I would probably start at 3 and 7 tenths or maybe even 3 8/10. But let's start low and just kind of see where we're at. So 3 7/10 times 3 7/10. Again, what I'm trying to do here is find a number times itself that multiplies out to be close to 14 52/100. It's not going to be exact because we're getting an estimate here. So 7 times 7 is 49. And then we've got 21 plus 4, which is 25. We're going to insert our 0. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 3 is 9, 10, 11. And when I add this up, I see, and then place my decimal in, I see I am getting quite close to 14 52/100, but I'm still a little bit low. So I want to try the next largest number, which is 3 8/10. So 3.8 times 3.8. 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 6 is 30. Insert our 0. 3 times 3 again is 24. 3 times 3 is 9, or 3 times 8 is 24. 3 times 3 is 9, 10, 11. And with this one, once I added my decimal place, 2 decimals because there's 2 spaces after the decimal, I see that I am very, very close. So if I were to estimate the square root of 14 52/100, if I was estimating to the nearest tenth, I would say that it's around 3.8. So how did we do that? That was kind of a complicated, long problem. You might want to pause this video to write down these steps. The first thing that we did was we figured out what 2 integers it was between. So in the last problem, we said 14 52/100, the square root of it, will be somewhere between 3 and 4. Our second step was to figure out if it's near the half mark, if it's right in between those 2 numbers, or if it's less, or if it's more. And so we kind of said, well, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, so I knew that my 14 52/100 was closer to the 4, so it's going to be, above the 3.5 mark. And then our last step was kind of the part that took a long time because we have to do math by hand. We're finding one number that's too high and one number that's too low. And actually, we didn't even do that in the last one. Let me go back for just a second. If we had done 3.9 times 3.9, I'm just going to kind of quicken our pace a little bit, we would have gotten to 15 21/100. And so we found one that was too high and one that was too low. And then we select the one that's closest. And so that's why we picked this one right here. Sorry, I forgot that last step in the last one. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and pause this video and try these next 2 problems on your own. Okay, so hopefully you got the same answer that I did. When we think about the number 33, the square root of 33, I'm going to know that it's between 5 and 6. And I know that it's between 5 and 6 because 5 squared is 25 and 6 squared is 33. So 36, excuse me. And so 33 is closer to that 6 squared mark. So I know that I'm probably going to want to try the numbers 5.6, 5.7, 5.8. 5.9 is probably a little too far. It's not, 33 isn't super close to 36. So I'm probably going to try these 3 numbers. And so when you go ahead and do that, and again, on like an assessment, you would not be given a calculator here. So you're going to want to do the multiplication by hand. 5.6 times 5.6 is 31 36/100. 5.7 times 5.7 would be the next number we're going to check. 5.7 times 5.7 is 32 49/100. And again, that's close. We're really close to 33. We don't want to stop there though because we want one that's too low, which is this one. This one was way too low, so we know it's not even a contender. Now we want to find one that's too high just to double check and make sure that it's, that we're picking the one that is absolutely closest. So 5.8 times 5.8 is 33 64/100. This number is 51 hundredths away from 33, and this number is 64 hundredths away from 33. So this is actually our closer one, meaning that our estimated square root, approximation symbol right there, our estimated square root is 5.7 because we're rounding to the nearest tenth. Okay, something similar for the next one, 130. Step one, I want to find out what two numbers is it between. Well, 11 times 11 is 121. 12 times 12 is 144, and we know 130 lies somewhere in between there. So I know it's between 11 and 12. Now, 130 is 11 away from 121, and it is it's 9 away from 121, and it's 14 away from 144. So I know it's probably going to be a little bit closer to 11 rather than 12. So I would probably want to check like 11.2, 11.3, 11.4, maybe even 11.5. So again, just for the sake of time, I will kind of just give out these calculations, but you would be trying this on your own, practicing your math skills. 11.2 times 11.2 would get us 125 and 44 hundredths. Now, obviously that's too low because we're shooting for 133. And then I want to try 11.3. So 11.3 times 11.3 would be 127.69. Again, still too low. So I'm going to move up and I'm going to try 11.4 times 11.4. which is 129 and 96 hundredths. Super close. We're 4 hundredths away here. Still low though, so I want to probably just to be 100% sure try 11 and a half or 11.5 times 11.5. And with that we would get 132.25, and so that's too high. But we knew we were kind of somewhere between the 11.4 and 11.5 mark, this being significantly closer. So my answer, now remember this was the negative square root of 130. My answer is approximately, and that squiggly equal sign is the approximation symbol, approximately negative 11.4.